So first question is kind of a basic one, and just a chance for the audience to get a little insight into what led you to decide to run for this. Because I think for myself, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, a lot of this I don't know, but I would think that for a person in a successful law practice, that would be the place to stay. That becoming a judge, while socially and politically might be an advance, there's a lot of sacrifices that a person would make personally, potentially financially, to become a judge. So for yourself, what was the light bulb or the nudge or the persuasion that led you to say, you know what, I'm going to run for judge?
Well, I'd say it was probably in November. And I'm Andrea Bouressa, by the way. I'm sure you said that before I came in.
And your name is in big letters up on the screens there too.
There's two of us with the same first name.
Right.
So I guess it was kind of in November that I was really struck with this feeling. And as you mentioned, I was practicing law. I was with Dyke & Smith in their downtown Dallas office. And I loved it. It was a great job. I worked with wonderful people, had amazing mentors there, and got some really excellent experience. And it was a very difficult thing to think about leaving that, not just professionally, but also for my family. And it did take a lot of consideration and thought. But probably around second week of November, third week of November, I was really reflecting on the judiciary and what it means to be a judge and what's important to have in characteristics in our judges. And I felt that it was time for me to stop shaking my head at things and stop thinking about things and actually be someone who steps up and takes action. And so I decided to go ahead and run for the 416th District Court. I do believe that a judge should hold his office in higher esteem than himself. And the thing that I think is most important in a judge is making sure that we have someone that applies the law, follows the law, and really respects the position they hold and doesn't treat it as a job that belongs to them personally, but really as a public office and doing service for the county.
Okay. Work experience. Tell us a little about the area of law in which you've practiced, any specialties, and specifically how that better qualifies you, or what specifically, in what specific way that qualifies you for this particular court.
Sure. So you probably have heard already the 416th District Court is a court of general jurisdiction. It's going to hear mostly civil and criminal cases. It will also hear a smaller percentage of family law cases. It's one of the courts that does hear some CPS matters, but by and large the bulk of the docket is civil and criminal cases. My practice area is commercial litigation. I have worked on civil cases involving issues ranging from statutory fraud, fraudulent transfers, premises liability to medical product liability defense, employment law, bad faith insurance. I've had a very wide range of civil experience. People tend to think of civil law as kind of a nutshell practice, the way criminal law and family law are kind of finite practice areas, but civil is literally everything else. And I've had the good fortune to work with attorneys who have given me exposure to a wide range of legal issues in those areas so that I could get some wide experience and really learn a lot of different areas of practice. I've been practicing for 7 years. I did resign my practice in November to commit myself to this run. I'm 100% committed to the campaign because I did feel such a strong calling for service. But in that 7 years, I was fortunate to get to work with some great attorneys. I've briefed and argued appeals in the Dallas Court of Appeals and the Tarrant County Court of Appeals. I've been fortunate enough to get to go to trial with a wonderful trial lawyer, and I've really learned from some great people over the last 7 years.
Taking cases to appeals, is there a special qualification, certification that's necessary in order to do appellate work?
Not to do it. If you do it long enough, you can become specialized, but no, there's no specific criteria in order to do it. I worked on appellate matters as a very young associate. In fact, I think I was a third-year associate the first time that I briefed and argued an appeal to the Court of Appeals. So I started with a smaller firm in Dallas, and that was great in terms of the benefit of getting hands-on practice. As a matter of fact, when I was a third-year law student, I was clerking at that firm, and one of my first mentors took me to get a student trial card and started taking me to court as a third-year law student and sponsoring me so that I could get experience in the courtroom even before I graduated from law school. So, like I said, I've been fortunate to work with great folks. So.
Okay. Campaign financing. That's one of the questions that I've asked each of the candidates. As a citizen, it's always seemed a bit odd that lawyers, potential future plaintiffs, are potential campaign contributors. What's your position, your thoughts on campaign contributions, specifically from the legal profession to judicial candidates?
Well, I do understand why some folks might take pause, but I also feel that it's important for law firms and for attorneys who work at law firms to be able to be active in the judicial election process, because they're the ones who show up in those courts and they have a stake in making sure that there are good and qualified people on the bench. And I think that part of that, when you elect judges with integrity and judges with character, you don't have to worry about whether or not they're playing favorites with someone that might have helped them along the way. And so I think that it's mostly just a matter of electing judges with good character more than it is a problem of law firms being involved in that process. I would hate to see law firms not have an opportunity to get involved in selecting the judges before whom they're going to appear.
Now, are there any particular instances where your integrity and character were on the line, where you had to say to someone, no, I won't do that, or yes, I will do that, based on a character issue or ethical issue?
I think throughout the campaign process, we're constantly confronted with that. We're meeting with a lot of different people and we're standing in front of a lot of different audiences. And there are always folks that are wanting to steer you to answer a question a certain way, or to bend the rules on this donation or that donation. And yeah, if you stand strong, if you stand firm, then those moments don't stand out to you because you move through them so quickly and so easily. So I can't think of one in particular, but I just think as a candidate, you're constantly confronted with questions where you have to decide how to handle yourself. And that shows in how the candidates perform at events like these.
And what about professionally? Have there been cases that you refused to accept, cases that you got into and had to recuse yourself from?
No, I've never had a situation with a client where they wanted me to do something unethical. Generally, if a client asked me to do something that I couldn't do, it was because they didn't know I couldn't do it. And once I explained the reason that I couldn't file whatever it was that they wanted to file, then they were okay with it. It's usually a matter of them not understanding than it is that pressure to try to get you to do something unethical.
Okay. Obviously, with this being a Tea Party forum, one of the things that we're looking for are candidates that are conservative. And most of us have our own personal ideas about what makes a person a conservative. How would you rate yourself as a conservative, and probably more importantly, how do you define what a conservative really is?
Well, I've always been very open about my conservative principles. I'm pro-life, I'm pro-Second Amendment, I do hold conservative values very dear, but I'm not running for a legislative position. I'm running for judge. And so there's a different conservative principle that comes into play there, and that's the principle of judges sticking to their job and not trying to do the legislatures. We've seen executive branch issues with that as well. So I think that part of the conservative principle that I can bring to the bench is that I'm not going to be a judicial activist. If you're looking for someone that's going to be the conservative activist on the bench, I'm not your candidate. I respect the judiciary. I respect the system of government that our framers created for us. And I think it's important that we keep that separation of powers and keep those branches of government limited to the authority that they were supposed to have. So I do think as a judge I would apply the rule of law. I would not overstep and try to legislate from the bench as we've seen some judges do.
Okay. And just a little more for yourself personally. Conservatism, anything you mentioned, pro-life, Second Amendment. Tell me a little bit more about that. I believe that we need to protect life at all stages. I don't believe that it starts on the day that you're born. Both of my daughters had names before they were brought into the world, and we had great relationships with them as they were growing and getting ready to enter the world. And I find target shooting to be great stress relief. So I'm learning to exercise my Second Amendment rights a little bit more frequently. And I think that just in general, personal responsibility, which is something else that you can bring to the courtroom, is making sure that people take responsibility for their actions and that people own their conduct and the consequences of their conduct. And that is a conservative principle. It's whenever you act, whenever you speak, you own the consequences of that, not just the behavior, but what follows from it. And liberals, I think, frequently want to shift the consequences to other shoulders to bear. And I oppose that
And so that's something I think that also could be brought to the bench in a way that helps to promote individual accountability.
Okay. Endorsements. Any particular endorsements that you've received for your candidacy that you're particularly proud of or that you'd like to share with folks tonight?
Well, I am proud to have been endorsed by my state representative, Jody Laubenberg. As you know, she championed HB2, which is a big pro-life bill, and I was very proud of her for that. I think that was a huge step for Texas and a great example for the nation, and so I'm honored to have her endorsement. I've also been endorsed by Candy Noble, who serves on the SREC, and I've been endorsed by several precinct chairs and by just a number of supporters and colleagues who have worked with me. I've been endorsed by Chris Prattville, who's an excellent attorney with Dr. McCox-Smith. And there's a full list on my website, but that gives you an idea of some of the folks that have been supporting me along the way.
Okay. Questions from the audience? No questions this evening. All right. Oh, sorry.
We do have one.
Yes.
I went to a political function about 2 years ago. Mainly there were attorneys, and I was talking to an individual who was an attorney who suggested that perhaps just attorneys should elect judges. It's an odd sort of thing. If you don't want to comment on that, that's fine. Do you have comments?
Well, attorneys may see judges most often, but it's the people that they represent who have to live with the outcomes of the decisions, and I certainly think that they ought to have a voice in selecting the judges that are making decisions that impact their families, their freedom, their businesses. Attorneys do have a unique perspective on what makes a good judge, and they have certain things that they look for, but I don't think that the decision should rest solely in their hands, because they may be the ones that have to go in and argue before those judges, but it's their clients that have to live with the rulings. So.
Yes, one more.
Perhaps I missed it. Did you say, I know you have a lot of civil experience. Do you have any criminal experience?
No, I've never represented a criminal defendant, and I've never been a prosecutor. I do believe that because I've had to learn so many different areas of practice over the last 7 years, that I can become proficient in criminal matters. So I don't have any concerns about my ability to do a good job and to apply the rule of law in those cases. But my background is in civil litigation. And I have also, to that point, I also have assisted with an international custody dispute, which is under a different set of laws than our family cases, but tangentially related to family law matters.
Okay. Andrea, thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Appreciate it.